Hello YouTube. If you're a frequent viewer of my video blog entries, this should be a familiar view to you. This is the typical bench view that I have on most of my videos. And I thought since this is the 10th video, I'll show you a little bit what it looks like behind the scenes and what other items I have in stock that we're gonna look at sooner or later. Alright, this is about all of the workbench I can capture with this camera's lens angle. You see on the left hand side there's a couple of mechanical tools. There's an etching station, micro drill, a small bench top saw for PCB material, a SMD reflow rework station. Then in the middle, in between all those lights, you see the that's the normal space where I do my projects, where I solder things together, and that's what you usually see in the video. And over to the right, you see more test stuff, the oscilloscope, signal generator, spectrum analyzer, all that sort of stuff. And we're gonna look at that all closer in a little bit here. I was just trying to give you a general overview. Like I said, thanks to the camera angle and the fact that this workbench is really long, this is kind of difficult to capture. And because of the lights are so bright, you see almost darkness on the bottom, even though the entire room is really bright. Each one of those lights claims to have 105 watts. Those umbrellas to the right and to the left have two of those in there, so 210 watts of fluorescent lights. And then there's two more as fill lights behind them. You can see one of them kind of in the center. And the actual room light that you cannot see is also two fluorescent lights with the same color temperature. So everything's nicely and neatly white balanced. Color temperature is 5,500 kelvins. And they're just cheap fluorescent lights that you can buy off Amazon. No idea how good they are, but they certainly work for my purposes, and that's all that really matters. Alright, let's look at the room from the exactly opposite corner, and let's see how I got all my storage organized. This shot is basically looking from the side where all the test equipment was located, from that corner over to the right in the previous shot on the workbench, looking exactly at the other corner. That's where the really nasty looking and halfway destroyed doors. I assume this was a kid's room from the previous occupant of this house, and let's just say the kid really abused the heck out of that door. But anyhow, let's move a little bit over to the right here, and if I pan over there, you see there's one shelf with small parts. I will go into that in greater detail here in a little bit. I'm just trying to give you the general overview. There's several part bins over there right next to that closet, and that closet is filled mostly with chemicals for PCB etching, photoresist, spray paint, and little parts, not very interesting. And to the right there you see again the PCB etching station. So it's the same thing, just a different view. If you pan over, see the light again at the window. And to the other side, here is another shelf space. That's very cheap industrial shelving that you can get from your most favorite DIY store. And those boxes on there, I'm going to talk about those in a little bit too. They are available from, in the United States at least, they're available from Office Depot, for instance. In Great Britain, they are available from the manufacturer itself, which is called Really Useful Box. Very interesting. Not cheap. One of those boxes over there costs you about 10 bucks a piece. But we'll look at those in a little bit, and they're very nice. Okay, now we're lacking one view, which is the look at my desk. And let me reposition the camera so that we can have a look at that real quick. For this shot, I positioned the camera in front of the closet door that you've seen in the previous shot. And that over there is my space where I edit my footage, where I do my day-to-day computer work. You see it's a dual screen setup with an HP DV6 laptop. And over to the right you see some of my radio gear. I still have so much stuff in the boxes that I would like to put up, but I haven't had the time to yet. But still, there's a great deal of radio equipment over there. You see a soundboard to the right, my voice over IP phone, and all the way over to the right on that document tray you see a couple of receivers and transmitters, which are for my wireless microphone and my IFB, my little wireless receiver that can be used for feedback. For instance, when I'm on Skype, I can move around freely in the room with a professional audio setup. Very nice, especially for upcoming webinars that I'm going to be giving and that kind of things, or the Q&A that's coming up in a little bit. I'm going to be using that kind of audio equipment. And let's actually start out over there. Let's go in a little bit closer and let's have a look at what I got there. Here you go, close-up shot of some of the radios I have. You see the several handheld radios on the left-hand side. They are not all amateur radio. For instance, the radio, the foremost left right now is an airband radio. It's a ISO airband radio and an integrated VOR, very nice radio. Then towards the center you see an old packet radio modem that I use for packet radio data exchange with the International Space Station. A all mode AM, no not AM, FM single sideband, and a CW 2-meter rig to the left, and on top of that a ISO FT1900 used for local repeater chatter. And all the way over to the right there's a couple of HF radios, and on the bottom you see my soundboard. It's a Behringer. I'm not very happy with it, not because of quality, it just doesn't have enough channels and not enough aux groups for me. It has 2 aux groups, but one of them is post fader, and I need them all to be pre-fader. So I'm gonna get rid of this one here shortly. I'm gonna buy a better one. I think it's called 2442, something like that. I do not remember. I have it stored somewhere. And if we pan over to the right there on the paper tray, I do have 2 wireless microphone receivers. A rather cheap one that my wife bought for me. It's actually doing a very good job, especially for simple videos and stuff like that, or just simple VoIP telephone conversations, Skype interviews, presentations, that sort of stuff. And brand new AS1100 IFB system with a wireless receiver that you can clip onto your belt and listen to audio. It's very nice to prevent feedback or anything of that nature when you're in a webinar or you're given a conference call or anything like that. Very nice, gives you very clean audio, sounds very professional. And in the middle there's an AKG professional multi-channel clip-on microphone system. I just recently got that. Very nice system. I love using it. Here's a close-up of the test equipment side of the workbenches that you've seen earlier. There's not really much on here. There's some little things down there that you may have not seen earlier. Let me see if I can get a zoom in on that. There's an analog discovery. That says analog devices and Digilin's idea of a USB oscilloscope, signal generator, and logic analyzer. It'll be part of a different review. What I like about it is that it interfaces seamlessly with MATLAB. So even though I got more professional equipment standing around here, this little box is really nice to generate a couple of signals or decode, demodulate signals on an IF level using MATLAB. Very nice. And next to it is another logic analyzer and some alcohol cleaning pads. Always nice to have around, definitely. There's the Atmel ISP programmer for Atmel AVRs. I was programming AVRs way before they were cool, and I think I'm gonna make a video on Arduino people and their weird distortion of reality about what they think, what they know about microcontrollers and what they really know. But let me not get started on that. This old, I don't want to say old, but 01 PDS 52SS dual channel oscilloscope. I love keeping it around simply because this thing is battery operated, or well, has an optional battery which I chose to purchase at the time, and it's so nice if you have to float your scope. You don't need to worry about mains ground or anything like that. You just disconnect the mains power supply, run it off battery, and you can float that darn thing. Of course, it's not a very good scope, but it's nice to look at some stuff, and for some initial troubleshooting, very nice. Alright, right here you see 2 power supplies, and you know, this is really the area where I need to invest some cash, definitely. I have this PeakTech, I think is a 40 amps. Of course you can see it from here, I can't, but it's quite a bit of current, up to I believe 30 volts it was, but I don't recall, I don't know. And the one on top of that is a very low current universal lab power supply. The analog meter is nice and all, but of course for that to be useful you put a multimeter in parallel with the output terminals and determine the voltage from there. Anything else is silly and more of a guess. Right here I have this TTI TF950 3 GHz frequency counter. This thing is awesome. It's really great. It of course has a 10 megahertz reference input, and I synchronize this with my 10 megahertz GPS disciplined oscillator that I got from Jackson Labs. You've seen it in previous videos. Jackson Labs kindly sent me a well, let's call it a sample of their GPS discipline TXCO temperature, nope, TCXO, there we go, temperature compensated oscillator. And right below that is a I don't want to say more simplistic frequency counter. What I love about this one, and it sometimes beats the TTI, it has a really adjustable gate time. Like with this pot there to the left, you can adjust the time without steps. The TTI only knows certain steps like 100 milliseconds, 1 second, 10 seconds, you know, something of that nature. This one right here with this pot down there to the left, you can adjust it in very fine analog steps, and that's sometimes very handy when you're trying to catch a fast changing signal or a pulse signal and you need just the right gate time. This is very nice. It does not have a 10 megahertz reference input. I bought it on eBay as allegedly broken, and all it was that there's a little ribbon cable inside that connects the front with the display on it to the PCB. And what happened is apparently the case got smashed somehow, and the front was kind of hanging out, and the ribbon cable was pulled. And really all I had to do after I bought this thing for like 10 bucks or so off eBay is push the connector back in place, and it's working just fine. Right below this we have a really old Rigel DG1022 20 megahertz arbitrary signal generator. Very nice. 20 megahertz is often all you need in a lab. There's supposed to be a 160 megahertz wave station 3000 from LeCroy sitting on top of this stack, but well, that was a mix-up. They sent me an 80 megahertz version, and then there was something dysfunctional on it as well, so that's why there's nothing higher frequency there yet. And I do have a couple of RF signal generators as well, which I don't like having sitting out here in the open, because first off, this house has been broken into before, and I don't really want to put nice gear on the bench that people would think about getting. And this LeCroy, let's move on to that, and let's talk about theft and prevention and this sort of stuff. A normal person has no clue about what this is, and it just goes window shopping, looking for empty houses and looking through the windows, trying to figure out what they can steal. Something like this can look like an all-in-one computer. So that's a nice incentive for people to break into houses. And we have a really good alarm system, and by far this room we're in is the most alarmed. There's window sensors, motion sensors, glass break sensors, anything you can possibly think of. Wired, wireless, all of the above. But detection is always nice, but prevention is better. So if I make sure that people can't see this sort of stuff and always keep it in the closet when I don't need it, this is definitely much better than detecting the break-in and hoping that the police is fast enough in responding. That doesn't always work. Anyway, back over here we have a 10 megahertz oven-controlled oscillator. There's a tutorial on how I built this thingy on my webpage. It's basically just an Apricot oven-controlled oscillator with a little PCB to it, TTL driver, some things like that. Next to it, must have in every lab, especially near the test equipment. A TI-84 calculator, industry standard, need to have it. The mouse, by the way, is for the LaCroix oscilloscope, and I don't know if you've seen this, but there is a keyboard on top of there too, and there's a couple of pins, but just adapters, you know, BNC to SMA, SMA to BNC, N to BNC, and in all directions, alligator clips and probes and whatnot. Those boxes are full with everything that I don't like getting up for, that I just need when I need to test an equipment. And there's some ceramic screwdrivers in there for adjusting trim caps and RF circuits without screwing up your measurements. The HDO 4024 you've probably seen in several videos. I did a teardown of it. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's a 200 megahertz 4-channel 12-bit oscilloscope. 12 bits gives you a little bit more resolution than your normal 8-bit scope. And I think, especially when looking at stuff near the noise floor and looking at power rails, I think power rails are the biggest problem, where you have high voltages and relatively small noise. And if you want to quantize that, you need to either have a scope that can extremely oversample, which is one way of getting an effective number of bits that's higher than what your ADC gives you, or you need a higher resolution ADC to begin with. Problem with oversampling is, if your signal isn't continuous, you have a problem. If it doesn't appear every time, if it doesn't appear periodically, if it appears random, you cannot detect this. You're going to be screwed that way. Alright, this is where I left off. Over there you see the LaCroix HD oscilloscope. Right next to it on the left hand side there's a couple of development boards from Analog Devices. They are PLL and synthesizer boards. But this is my most important space when I do something. This is where I shoot most of my videos. This is where I solder stuff together. This is where I assemble stuff. I do all this there. This space is perfect because it's right next to my mechanical side, where I make my PCBs, where I have my SMD reflow station and all that sort of stuff. And it's close enough to the test equipment side that the normal length of the probe wires is long enough that I don't have to drag my device under test over there. I have a simple Hakko soldering iron, very nice quality for its money. You see I got plenty of solder there, more than I'll ever need. And that little box there to the center left is just simple stuff that you need when you're soldering, desoldering pump, and several markers, and something to bend resistors and wire parts according to a scale and that sort of stuff. Alright, one over right here. We've seen this from a different shot. There's the Proxon benchtop table saw. Very nice for cutting PCB material. One tip, if you ever buy this thing, don't use the blade that's in it. Even if you're just using simple FR4 PCB material, the blade supplied with it is, as you would expect it for that price, extreme and utter garbage. So buy yourself a nice blade for it. Let's move the camera over one more time. Let's see if I can do this here without making the footage too shaky. It wasn't too bad, I guess. I have this etching station right here with the heating thingy in there and the bubbler and all that stuff. When I brought this over from Europe, my problem was that everything was made for 240 volts, obviously, and over here everything is 120 volts. But it was easy. Walmart had those heating thingies and an air pump available for, I don't know, $10 a pop, so I just swapped them, was done with it. Behind it you can see the Proxon stand and the drill. I used that for drilling PCB holes, quite obviously. And right next to it is this cheap, really cheap, hot air SMD reflow station. Not high quality. I use it to sell them, to actually invest some cash into this sort of stuff. But it does the job, so all that matters really. Okay, now let's look a little bit at my storage. So let me reposition the camera one more time, and we'll check out what all I got hidden away in my bins. This shelf you saw earlier is definitely one of the most important shelves. Up on this level right here, I have a bunch of kits, like resistor kits and capacitor kits and that sort of stuff. And down here, there's a bunch of boxes. There's over 2,000 different parts. We'll have a closer look at in a moment. Just stuff that you gotta have to run a moderately acceptable lab. There's some random stuff, multimeters and chargers and a bunch of batteries in there. I have a whole box full of battery elsewhere, but anyhow. Down here, this will be interesting. There will be another mailbag segment, but just as a preview, this is all kinds of stuff that companies have sent me that I still need to have a look at on the blog. It's not true for the SWR meter. I just put it there, didn't put it back in this case, and I didn't fix it yet. You may or may not have seen my video on the absolutely horrible grounding in that box. But everything else you see on the shelf is awaiting review. It's really, really good stuff in there, really nice stuff in there that we're going to check out on the forum soon. Down below is not much interesting stuff. There's some tools there and cleaning utensils, and one thing right there that we're going to look at sometime are, after my LNB teardown was so famous, I thought, okay, why don't we look at the other side, what's called a block-up converter, where TV stations feed their video signal into, and it translates this up to the 14 gigahertz KU band and send it up to the satellites that way. So we're going to look at that sooner or later. Alright, last reposition over to the other shelf. Let's see if we can do that in one shot. Looks like it. That was pretty smooth. There's tons of boxes of stuff. Really just stuff of everything you can think of. I have a box for tape. I have a box for cable ties. I have a box for computer cables. I have a box for SMD parts and all kinds of other stuff. What we're going to do now, we're going to drag some of those boxes out of the shelf, and we're going to look at the contents just as an idea for you, what you maybe need to have in your lab, or as an overview of what I have available. And if you see something, you say, okay, I want to see this on the blog, I want to see something about it, I'm really interested in this, let me know and I'm sure we can do something. Here's box number one. One thing you absolutely have to have is PCB material. Just plain copper clad board. Those with the blue films on here, they have photoresist on there, so you can just print your design on some transparent foil thingy and put it on there with UV light or whatever method you want to use. Obviously, pretty standard 160 by 100 millimeter prototyping PCBs. You see some of those have connector slots on there, very important to have around, and that's just a must-have. Of course not in that quantity, but if you're a serious home brewer, you need some sort of PCB material, definitely. Just as important as PCB material is solder itself, obviously. Have different diameters, the standard thicker 1 millimeter copper and lead based, not copper and lead based. Yeah, it does have copper, that's where I got that from. Alright, copper and lead based solder, pretty standard, standard cheap 60-40 solder. You just gotta have that. And thin solder here, what do we have here? 0.5 millimeters, still a little thick for my taste. I love soldering with 0.35 millimeter solders. But this is good if you're soldering connectors together or anything where you really need some more solder flow. Right here, some lead-free solder. I don't know if you can see that. I hate lead-free. Lead-free just doesn't work very well for me. Of course, solder wick. If you solder stuff, you gotta desolder stuff. So you need solder wick in various sizes. It's just some spare rolls in here. The actual rolls that I'm using are in that box that you saw earlier, right next to the solder station. Another thing everyone needs is wire. All kinds of wire. Standard single wires like this here, just to wire stuff on your PCB. Silver wire like this kind here. If you want to be precise, copper wire with silver coating on there. You need plenty of this. Over here is some magnet wire, what it's called. I don't know, I guess people make magnets out of this, but just to wind inductors and that sort of stuff. So if you do anything with RF, you definitely need some of that as well. One of the many boxes with connectors and adapters that I have. Here's some SMA stuff and BNC to SMA, and this whole box is full with all kinds of high frequency connectors and interconnects, and you see there's two 40 gigahertz relays in there as well. Those are very nice. Somebody sold these on eBay claiming that they were the standard SMA versions of these relays that are rated up to 18 gigahertz. But if you look at this connector closely and you know what you're talking about, you'll notice that this is not a standard SMA. We can leave it as a trick question. Who knows what kind of connector this is? Please post below in the comment section. Anyhow, as you can see by this annex here, after the model number, it's actually a 40 gigahertz version. So very nice shot on eBay, definitely. On to the next box. This is a very important box. Enclosures, you can never have enough. Simple plastic ones like this here, metal ones like these. Those are always nice for little RF circuits or any kind of circuits. I got this. I had several of those, but I guess I used them all in projects. It's just very important that you have all kinds of enclosures. You need them. They cost a bit of money. Keeping a little bit of stock like this definitely costs you a few bucks, but it's really important to have the right enclosures for your projects, definitely. You gotta have a place to put your old projects. So I have this little dump in here where I put simple projects. This was a purely CMOS based clock, and I don't know what that was. I think I was just messing around with some CMOS type ICs. There was a clock generator here, and I don't know, I think it would just count the 7 segment display up. Every time it would make it through 0, over 9 overflowing, one of the LEDs will progress. Very basic stuff I was playing with. A crystal tester, you'll find that on the blog. Started little CW transmitter here. I don't know, got bored and started it and then ran out of time. Never completed it. But yeah, you gotta have a box like this, because there's gonna be this moment where you think of an old project and you just want to look at something, you wonder how you did it then, or you may want to continue it. But don't throw your stuff away. Keep it somewhere in a box. Displays. Obviously, if you're doing microcontroller projects or anything that needs a human-machine interface of any sort, you need a box full of displays. They're junk cheap nowadays, especially the ones that are HD 4478 compatible. Just buy a chunk of them on eBay and stick them in a box. You never know when you'll need them. One thing I forgot to show earlier when I showed you the PCB materials, I have a chunk of these Rogers PCB materials, which are for microwave kind of circuits. They are just too big to fit in any of the boxes that I have, but you see I have a chunk of them. With those, I either use the toner transfer method, just print the PCB layout on a certain kind of paper and then use the laminator to transfer it on here, or I actually have some spray on photoresist that I use. I don't know, I don't like that photoresist. I have everything figured out with my laminator and the kind of paper right now that I don't need to worry about that part. I just do the toner transfer and it's very reliable. I don't know if you spotted this little box earlier. I was sitting next to the test equipment, but it contains a chunk of adapters of all sorts. Very interesting stuff. Here's a SMA dummy load. I think it's rated for 5 watts or something like that. 100 dB attenuators, very nice for checking the FM selectivity of an FM receiver. I guess you can test other modes as well, but you need quite a bit of attenuation to get a signal generator down to that kind of levels where you want it to be. However, you need to be really careful. Having 100 dB attenuator is all nice and good, but if your wire or your signal generator radiates just a little bit, all that goes down the drain. 100 dB is quite a bit of attenuation. Here's another little terminator. I have a bunch of those. I have a whole box of those somewhere. They're very nice if you have some differential circuits where the outputs need to be equally terminated, but you're really just using one. You can use that. Here's a bunch of passive stuff from Christec, all kinds of stuff. I don't know what they cost, but they're very nice. Simple attenuators and RF detectors. Got a few of those. I think they're available from Mouser and DigiKey and all the big ones. There are some multipliers in here, passive multipliers, like here's a doubler. It takes 850 megahertz to 2 gigahertz in. I don't know how well it focuses on this. That's okay, I guess. And same here, just a little bit higher. This one does 2 gigahertz to 4 gigahertz input frequency, so 4 to 8 gigahertz out. They're easy, simple signal generators if you need it for some simple things. I mean, they're even good enough if you have some sort of amplifier to pair them with a spectrum analyzer. Like the cheap one I have on my bench. I have test equipment up to about 18 gigahertz, and if I trick around with mixers and that sort of stuff, I can get till about 40 gigahertz. But anyhow, the cheap equipment that I keep on the bench is still useful for that. So money is really not an issue. Of course, it's nice to break out a Roda spectrum analyzer and be able to look at a signal at 6 gigahertz directly. But if you don't have that, if all you have is a simple spectrum analyzer like the one that I have on my bench, that's no problem. You can use a mixer. If you're looking at a signal at 6 gigahertz, you can mix it down to 500 megahertz and look at it on your spectrum analyzer. Really, it's just always a question of effort, really, and not so much about how much budget you have. If you have a little bit of money, you can be lazy, but you can't really do stuff better. Not necessarily, at least. It's just like fishing. Doesn't really matter how much money you got. Doesn't mean you're gonna catch the bigger fish. Definitely not. You just gotta have them nowadays. SMD parts, plenty of them. There's a resistor kit, and there's another resistor kit. There's a capacitor set, and I'm not even sure how much I trust these. You know, those cheap kits that you can buy off eBay for, I don't know, $10 or so. So I really have no big trust in them. But oh well, resistors are resistors, and they seem to check out. The values seem to check out. I wouldn't use it anything that life depends upon, but they certainly do the trick. Everything that I really needed ever for more precision, I bought. I have in these little bags right here. Same with capacitors. Those here are all different value capacitors in various sizes. Big caps, voltage regulation, that sort of stuff. And here I do have some parts that I just went out and bought that I needed. The SP5055 PLL, for instance, old part, couple of LEDs, red, green, yellow, you gotta have them. Obviously, ferrite beads, I don't know why they're in here, that's not SMD. Couple of capacitors there in the middle, then some analog devices, DDS chips, couple of MMICs, amplifiers, RF amplifiers. Moves on here. What we got here? ICS 501, FT232, Vinculum chips, nice USB host controllers. I got a bunch of Maxim parts, and of course very important microcontrollers. I got the little Jelly Bean transistor BC850, Atmegas, AT-Tinys, all kinds of Atmel microcontrollers, a little bit of logic in there, standard CMOS logic. You gotta have any 555s and RGB LEDs, a few laser diodes, that sort of stuff. This is more the universal box with a little bit of everything in there that you just need to build a SMD circuit or to fix an SMD circuit if something's broken. A must-have in every lab: batteries. You can never have enough batteries. I got a ton of them, and it's good that way. Just tiny button cells, some bigger batteries, your standard AA's, AAA's. You can never have enough of them. And I actually invested a couple $100 in rechargeable batteries. I have a ton of AA's, AAA's, and 9-volt block batteries as rechargeable batteries, and I feel it saved me a fortune already. If you don't have batteries in your lab, sooner or later you'll be screwed. Promise. Well, that's the kind of box you've been sitting on my shelf earlier. Like I said, I have more than 2,000 different parts, and I think this was definitely an understatement. If you look at the amount of boxes and the amount of spacers they have, I want to say it's more than 3, maybe 4,000, but it's quite a few parts. And those are very nice. They're from a European distributor called Conrad. They cost like, I don't know, €1 pop, And so what's that right now? $1.40 if you live in the United States. Anyway, you can't get them in the States, at least not to my knowledge. If anyone has seen them in the United States of this exact form factor, let me know, because I'm sick of paying like $40 shipping to get them over here from Europe when I'm out. Anyway, it's just a few things, like here's some ferrites and IF filters. We got some VCOs in here, some mini circuits, mixers. There's another OCXO from Apricon. Those things are expensive, and I keep plenty of stock of this sort of stuff. You know, just your average transistors, and I have so much stuff. It wouldn't be worth going through all of them. You know, just a handful of ICs right here, and they exist with different spacings, and they're color coded. So, like here, this mechanical box full with some connectors and switches is only a 5-spacer thingy. Well, I guess there isn't 5 spacers, but there's 5 spaces to put stuff, while those transparent ones are 10. I really need to get around to inventorize all this stuff and, you know, just numbering those boxes. Because in the past, what has happened several times is that I would go through all my boxes and look at them, and I would find that I have 5 different locations in which I have any 555s, or I think there was once 3 different locations which were filled with 2N222 quad 2s. By the way, an interesting fact, if you move from Europe to the United States, is the difference in part use. Kind of not just what they had with tubes back in the days, where there were European type models of tubes and American type tubes, which basically were the same, just with different names. You find that too if you move from one country to another, that for instance in Europe we use the BC 547 like crazy. Americans are more hooked on the 2N3904. That's their jelly bean part. It's very interesting to see that, and I need to do a better job in my articles and in my blogs to point that out, because if I remember correctly, how I was when I was a beginner, I would get that part that it would say in a circuit drawing. You know, if it told you need a BC 547, you need a BC 547. You wouldn't put a 2N3904 in there. So I want to do a better job at definitely pointing that out, that any jelly bean NPN transistor would be good at that point, and list a couple of examples. I think that'll make life a whole lot easier for beginners who don't have boxes full of parts like I do, and you really don't need them. That's just the stuff that I gathered over years, and it's definitely nice to have. It's nice not having to compromise. It's very nice just being able to grab stuff off the shelf. That's definitely true. One thing you have to have is a little assortment of resistors. This is again from the German company Conrad. I mean, they're not making the resistors obviously, but they're putting it in a nice box for you. There's so many people that offer the same stuff in every country. I mean, you can get them off eBay for that matter. There's those carbon film ones. Of course, there are metal ones that you wouldn't use in certain RF applications, but usually can handle more power. They're so convenient because you immediately see when you're out or almost out, and then just like I did here, just go ahead and order some from DigiKey or wherever you want to get your parts, obviously. Same story with the capacitors. Some standard electrolytic capacitor values. Same company here, Conrad. If you live in Europe, you're familiar with them. If you don't, no hard feelings. You can get your parts anywhere. This is very nice if you build RF circuits. You come across those polystyrene film capacitors quite often. They are very nice. You've probably seen them before. They're used in audio circuits as well. Actually, they're used anywhere where people prefer higher quality capacitors. And while we're talking about capacitors, I have this little set right here with those, I guess, I'm not even sure what they are, what type they exactly are. I'd have to look that up. It didn't say on the box. I just know that, oh god, what did I take this out of? I'll check that later. Those are really high quality ones, and needless to say, a kit like this will cost you quite a bit of money, but it's really, it's not really worth the savings to not get this sort of stuff, because you really pay so much shipping if you really order parts every time you need them. You're really better off in buying yourself some decent kits and stocking up on a decent amount of parts and just paying 10 or even more bucks on shipping every time you need a couple of parts. This box is a real lifesaver. This is full of adapters, everything to anything you can imagine. It seems like some standard connectors slipped in this box, but really every direction, any kind you can possibly think of. There's another box like this somewhere around here, full with adapters. There's hundreds of them, and a typical thing for an adapter box like this is, you see there's plenty of adapters in there, but the one that's always missing is the one I need. And if you have this kind of box in your lap, you know this feeling. It does not matter how many different connectors and adapters you have, you never have the one you need. So you're gonna have to build one out of several connectors, which is not very clean. Then you're gonna go ahead and order one of those, and you'll never need it again. That's just how life in the lab goes, always. If you play a lot with thermal compounds, SMD soldering paste, or anything of that nature that traditionally gets dispensed using syringes, I highly recommend this. I think I got this from Mouser. It's basically a needle kit full with all kinds of dispensing needles. They aren't sharp needles like the ones you would use for injecting stuff into people's bodies, obviously. They are the kind that you need to dispense solder paste or anything of that nature. Very nice to have, not only for the intended purpose, but also for applying oil, for instance, on very small parts. And some people even use these as suction needles for SMD placement, for very simple homebrew SMD component placing using what do they use? They use vacuum pumps of some sorts, and especially these 45-degree angled needles up here are very nice for that. They come in various sizes. I don't remember what the whole kit cost here, but it can't have been much. It's definitely worth it. And the other thing you of course need in that case is buy yourself a couple of syringes. And I've noticed here in the United States is actually more difficult than you'd think. It seems like there's really that much drug abuse that they're limiting the sales on syringes and that sort of items. I'm not sure if that's the right way, because that's obviously forcing people to reuse material. Now you could of course say you couldn't care less about people getting sick if they want to do drugs all day, but odds are you're paying for it, because those people usually cannot afford health insurance. That's why they're in that position to begin with. So are you just shooting yourself in the foot? But that's enough material for a whole nother video. Alright, I think this is going to be the last box I'm going to show you guys. This is full with all kinds of connectors. Here's just some PCB mount and serial parallel port kind of connectors. Standard 3.5 millimeters audio connectors. There should be some 4-pin ones in here too for iPhone and similar interfaces. See, there's some BNCs left in here. That's not good, because I have an extra box just for BNCs, and I have another box just for SMAs. So you see, I'm definitely hooked up with connectors for life. And it's the same story here and the story I had with the adapters. The connectors I need, I never have in stock. Once I buy them, I'll never need them again. So this box keeps on growing.